Don't bring her in here. She'll bite your hand off before you even get close." The man didn't even look at Sergeant Holt when he said it. He was staring straight ahead at the intake counter, jaw set, one hand wrapped tight around the leash of the largest German Shepherd Tessa Garland had ever seen in her 11 years of working veterinary triage. The dog, a 90-pound sable male with a scar running from his left ear down to his jaw, stood perfectly still beside the sergeant's boot. Not calm still, coiled still. The kind of stillness that exists right before something breaks. Tessa had taken exactly 3 steps into the waiting room before the man spoke. She stopped. She looked at him. Then she looked at the dog. His name was Ranger. She'd already read the intake form. The sergeant's name was Joel Calloway. Combat veteran, Marine Force Recon, 2 tours in Helmand, 1 in Syria. Currently employed as a canine handler with the Briarfield County Sheriff's Department. Ranger had served beside him for 6 years. 6 years of finding things buried in dirt and darkness that human beings had tried very hard to hide. The appointment had been flagged before they even walked in. The front desk had called back to the treatment area twice. "We've got a reactive K9 coming in. Handler says no approach without permission." Standard stuff. Tessa had handled reactive dogs before. She'd handled reactive handlers before too, which was sometimes the harder job. She'd been the one to volunteer when the other techs hesitated near the doorway. "I'll go," she'd said, and she meant it the way she always meant things. Simply, without drama, because someone had to and it might as well be her. Now she was standing 12 feet from a dog that could genuinely hurt her, and the man holding his leash was looking at her the way people sometimes look at furniture they're not sure will fit through a doorway. Not hostile. Just certain she wouldn't make it through. "I heard you," she said. She kept her voice level. She didn't move. "I'm not going to approach him without your go-ahead. I just wanted to introduce myself." Calloway's eyes finally tracked to her face. He was somewhere in his mid-40s, broad through the shoulders, with the kind of weathered stillness that comes from spending years learning to be very quiet in very dangerous places. There was a softness around his eyes that contradicted the rest of him, or maybe it wasn't softness. Maybe it was exhaustion. She'd learned not to confuse the two. "Tessa Garland," she said. "I'm the senior vet tech assigned to Ranger today. Dr. Abington will do the exam, but I'll be assisting, and I'll be the one handling the IV line if we need sedation." "We won't need sedation." "Okay. He doesn't do well with strangers touching him. He bit the last tech who tried. I read the notes. Then you know he's not a pet. I know he's a working dog with a suspected torn ligament in his left foreleg who's been compensating for the pain for at least 3 weeks based on the way he's standing right now." She paused. "And I know that's been hard to watch." Something shifted in Calloway's face. It was brief, a flicker, a seam opening and closing, and then the stillness came back. But she'd seen it. She always saw it. It was the part of this job nobody put in the textbooks. The dog is rarely just the dog. "He won't let me near the leg," Calloway said, quieter now. "When did he start guarding it?" 3 weeks ago, maybe 4. He was on a track, caught his leg on something. Fence wire. He looked down at Ranger. The dog hadn't moved. He finished the track. Of course he did. Calloway looked back at her. There was something careful in his expression now. "Most people say, 'Wow,' or 'That's impressive,'" he said. "It is impressive," Tessa said. "It's also how dogs end up with injuries that take 6 months to heal instead of 6 weeks. He was doing his job. That's what he knows how to do." She crouched down slowly, not toward the dog, just down to reduce her height, to change the geometry of the room. Calloway gave a short nod. "When you come home at night and sit down, does he come to your side or does he go to his crate?" A pause. "His crate. Has that changed recently?" Longer pause. "Yeah, he's been doing it because lying down hurts less when he's curled. The crate gives him walls to press against." She looked at Ranger. The dog was watching her now, not with aggression, with assessment. There was a difference, and she'd learned to read it the same way she'd learned to read anything, by paying attention when everyone else had already decided they knew what they were seeing. "He's been managing it alone because he doesn't want you to worry." The waiting room had gone quiet. She hadn't noticed until that moment that the 2 other clients near the far wall had stopped their separate conversations. A woman with a cat carrier was watching over the top of her glasses. A teenage boy had stopped scrolling his phone. Calloway cleared his throat. "Dr. Abington's seen him before. Ranger trusts him. Good. That'll help." He doesn't trust new people easily. I know. I'm not saying that to be rude. I didn't take it that way. Tessa stood slowly. She clasped her hands loosely in front of her. I'm going to go get the room ready. When you're both comfortable, come on back and we'll go at whatever pace Ranger sets. If he wants 10 minutes before anyone touches him, we give him 10 minutes. She turned to go, then stopped and looked back, not at Calloway, but at the dog. Hey, Ranger. She said it the way she said most things. No performance in it, just plain and direct. She didn't reach out her hand. She didn't make kissy sounds or lean toward him. She just said his name. The dog's ears moved. Forward, then relaxed. His tail, which had been rigid at his flank, swung once. Once. Barely. Like a door opening an inch to check the weather. Calloway stared at that tail like he'd seen something impossible. She went back through the treatment door before he could say anything. The exam room was a rectangle of fluorescent light, and the smell of antiseptic and the low mechanical hum of the oxygen unit that nobody'd fixed for 3 years. Tessa laid out the equipment she'd need. Not everything, just what was visible, because a cluttered table read as threat to an animal that had spent its career reading environments for danger. She put the thermometer out of direct sightline. She positioned the exam table pad at floor level rather than raised. She turned the overhead light down one setting and let the secondary lamp do the work instead. Dr. Abington knocked twice and came in. He was 62, compact, with a silver beard he'd had since before Tessa was born and a way of entering a room like he owned the air in it, not arrogantly, just completely. Calloway's outside, he said. I know. I just spoke with him. He give you the speech, the one about Ranger biting the last tech, the very one. Abington picked up the intake form, scanned it. The last tech reached over his head to take his temperature without introducing herself first. Ranger responded accordingly. I'm aware. He's going to try to position himself between you and the dog the entire time, also aware. Abington set the form down and looked at her. He'd known Tessa for 7 of her 11 years in the field. He'd hired her away from a shelter in Columbus where she'd been doing intake assessments on dogs the county was going to euthanize if nobody claimed them. Dogs with bite histories, trauma histories, the kind of records that made adoption impossible. She'd rehabbed 14 of them in her first year, rehomed 11. You already got to him, Abington said. It wasn't a question. I got to the dog. The handler's still deciding. That's usually the harder one, usually. The door opened. Ranger came in first, pulling just enough ahead on the leash to clear the threshold and assess. He stopped in the center of the room, head up, scanning. His left foreleg made contact with the floor at a slightly wrong angle, barely perceptible. The compensation so practiced it had become muscle memory. But Tessa caught it. She always caught it. Calloway followed him in, already taller in the smaller space, already taking up more atmospheric pressure than the room seemed designed to hold. His eyes moved across the equipment, across Abington, and then settled on Tessa with a kind of weighing quality she'd become accustomed to in people who spent their lives managing risk. Good to see you, Joel, Abington said, extending a hand. Calloway shook it without taking his eyes fully off the room. Tessa's going to assist me today, Abington continued. You've met briefly, then you know she's excellent. Calloway made a sound that wasn't agreement and wasn't disagreement. Let's let Ranger lead, Abington said, and stepped back. This was the part that separated vets who were good at their jobs from vets who were good with animals, knowing when to become background. Abington had understood this for decades. He moved to the far counter and picked up Ranger's file and appeared to read it, and the room lost one of its points of attention, and Ranger, almost imperceptibly, shifted his weight. Tessa sat down on the floor. Not cross-legged, not demonstratively. She just descended to the floor, back against the lower cabinet, knees up, and became shorter than the dog. She had a piece of gauze in her hands. She wasn't doing anything with it. She was just sitting there with this useless piece of gauze, looking at the space approximately 6 inches to the left of Ranger's ear. Calloway opened his mouth. She felt him do it. She held up 2 fingers without looking at him, and to his visible and evident surprise, he closed it again. Ranger looked at the gauze. Then at her hands, then at her face. He took 1 step toward her, stopped. His nose went down, working. She'd worn the same soap she always wore, no perfume, no lotion, and she'd eaten a plain lunch and washed her hands with unscented soap twice before coming in. This was not accidental. He took another step. His left leg trembled once when it took his weight. A sound came from Calloway that was not quite a word. Ranger reached her. His nose touched the gauze, then her knuckle, then lifted to her wrist. She let him. She sat completely still and let him read her the way he'd been trained to read everything, thoroughly, methodically, without anyone rushing him toward a conclusion. Then he sat down, right there on the floor next to her, not facing away, not tensed. Just sat. His shoulder made contact with her knee, and he allowed it and didn't move. The room held its breath. Tessa looked up at Calloway. His face had done something she hadn't quite anticipated. Not shock, exactly, more like recognition. Like a man who has been carrying something heavy for a long time and has just seen someone else acknowledge its weight. "Can I look at his leg now?" she asked quietly. Calloway didn't answer immediately. He was staring at his dog. Ranger, who had bitten a vet tech, who required 2 handlers to manage at the last clinic, who had been flagged as a liability in 3 separate records, was sitting on the floor with his shoulder pressed against a woman he'd met 9 minutes ago, and he looked for the first time in what Tessa suspected was a long time, like he might be willing to let someone help. "Yeah," Calloway said. His voice had changed, lower, less defended. "Yeah, go ahead." She worked slowly. She ran her fingers up from his paw, reading each tendon, each joint, with a pressure that started at almost nothing and built only when Ranger didn't react. He flinched once, at the mid-foreleg, and she stopped and waited, and when his breathing evened out, she continued. She found the site of injury by feel before Abington confirmed it by palpation, a partial tear in the flexor tendon, above the carpus, with secondary inflammation that suggested the fence wire incident had been aggravated at least twice since. "He's been working on it," she said. "I told him to rest," Calloway said. Abington made a small sound. Not judgment, just acknowledgement. "He doesn't rest well," Calloway continued, and there was something in his voice that suggested he was not only speaking about the dog. Tessa kept her hands where they were, not moving, just present against the warm fur of Ranger's leg. "How long have you 2 been working together?" 6 years, since he was 18 months? 16. He came in young. Exceptional drive, they said, took to tracking faster than any dog they'd run in 5 years. There was pride in it. There was also grief, and she knew which one came first. "He's been the best partner I've ever had." Ranger, as if he understood the word partner, leaned slightly harder into Tessa's knee. "He's going to be okay," she said. "The tear is partial. With the right protocol, rest, hydrotherapy, progressive load, he's looking at 12 weeks, maybe 10 if he's compliant. He won't be compliant, then we'll do it your way, and it'll be 14. She looked up. "But he'll get there." Calloway sat down. Not on the exam bench, on the floor, a few feet away, with the abruptness of a man whose legs simply decided to do it without his permission. He put his hands on his knees. He looked at Ranger. "They told me he might not come back from this one," he said. "The clinic we went to first, they said with a working dog this age, a tendon injury like this, it might be time to consider." He stopped, pressed his lips together. "I didn't let them finish the sentence." "Good," Tessa said, "because they were wrong." He looked at her sharply. "I'm not dismissing the conversation. There are cases where it's the right conversation to have. This isn't one of them." She was direct. She'd been told she was too direct. She'd also been told that the families of animals who'd been euthanized too soon wished someone had been more direct with them. Ranger is 8 years old, which in a large working breed puts him in the equivalent of his mid-40s. He has no systemic disease, his organ function based on last blood work was excellent, and the injury is localized. He has good years left. Calloway exhaled. It was one of those exhalations that carries more than air. "I didn't know," he said quietly. "What to believe? That's why you're here." "I didn't want to bring him somewhere new. He doesn't." He gestured vaguely at the room. "He doesn't do well. He's doing well right now." Calloway looked at Ranger again. Ranger had not moved. His shoulder was still against Tessa's knee. His breathing was steady and slow. "He never does that," Calloway said. "Sits, chooses someone, He paused, seemed to decide something. "After his last handler, before me, something happened on a deployment. I don't know the full story. The records were incomplete, but he came to me with trust issues that took me 8 months to work through." He rubbed the back of his neck. "I thought I was the only person he'd ever do that with. Just choose." Tessa looked at the dog. Ranger looked back at her with dark, calm eyes that had seen things she would never have a full accounting of. "Animals trust people who don't need anything from them," she said. "Not always." but often, he could tell you weren't afraid, and he could tell I wasn't performing. He's done enough reading in his career to know the difference. She scratched gently behind his ear. He didn't pull away. He didn't choose me over you. He's just letting you know that it's safe here. Calloway was quiet for a long moment. Is it? He asked. It was such a plain question. Such a stripped-down, unguarded thing to say. She thought he might not have meant to say it out loud, the way people sometimes think a thought so hard it becomes speech before they've decided to speak. Yeah, she said. It is. Abington, who had been a quiet presence at the counter for the last several minutes, cleared his throat softly. I'll write up the treatment protocol. Tessa, you want to walk them through the home care? Yes. He left them to it, the way he always knew when to leave things to Tessa. She spent 40 minutes going through the protocol with Calloway, not reading from a sheet, talking him through it the way she'd talk a frightened parent through a newborn's care plan, which was to say carefully and completely and without making him feel like an idiot for not already knowing. He asked good questions. She expected that. People who were good at their work in high-stakes environments usually asked good questions when they found themselves in someone else's. She showed him the range of motion exercises. She demonstrated the correct way to apply the compression wrap and then watched while he did it and corrected him once, gently, matter-of-factly, and didn't make anything of it when he got it right the second time. Ranger tolerated all of it, more than tolerated. He submitted to the wrap with something approaching patience, which Calloway told her was not a word he'd ever expected to use in relation to his dog. He knows it feels better, she said. How do you know that? Because dogs know a lot more than we give them credit for, and they'll cooperate with treatment when they understand it's helping, especially when the person doing it isn't stressed. She looked at him steadily. Were you stressed at the last clinic? A beat. Yeah, Ranger would have been stressed too. Dogs co-regulate with their handlers. His anxiety wasn't his alone. She could see him absorbing this. She didn't push it. The hydrotherapy appointments, doctor. Abington can refer you to a facility on Clover Street, or if transportation is difficult, there are some basic water exercises you can do in a bathtub. The temperature needs to be. I have a truck, he said. Transportation isn't the issue. Okay, the issue is. He stopped. Started again. I have 12-hour shifts, 3 days on, 2 off. My schedule doesn't. He exhaled. I've been managing his care around my shifts and it hasn't been working. Is there someone who can help with the midday sessions? The hydrotherapy needs to be consistent every 48 hours, or the inflammation will. There's no one. He said it flatly, without self-pity, as a simple statement of condition. My sister lives in Portland. My ex-wife, he stopped. There's no one. Tessa looked at him for a moment, looked at Ranger, who was watching her with those steady dark eyes. There's a veteran support services program through the county, she said. They run a volunteer network specifically for canine handlers. Transportation, secondary care, things like that. It was started by a woman whose husband served and came home with a PTSD service dog that needed specialist care she couldn't manage alone. She opened a drawer, found a card, held it out. Her name is on there. She'll help. He took the card, looked at it for a long moment. Why do you have that card in your drawer? He asked. Because you're not the first person to sit on that floor, she said simply. He looked up at her. There was something in his face she recognized, something she'd learned to see in the long years of rooms like this one. The look of a person who has been managing alone for so long they've forgotten what it felt like not to. It wasn't weakness. It was the opposite of weakness. It was what you look like when you've been strong past the point where strength is supposed to carry you. I'm going to be straight with you, she said. Ranger is going to recover. He will work again if that's what he and you decide. But that timeline depends entirely on whether he gets consistent, low-stress care, which means the person caring for him can't be running on empty. She paused. How long since you've slept more than 5 hours? He didn't answer, which was an answer. Ranger's been mirroring your stress, she said. That's what the crate behavior is. That's what the reactivity is. He's not just injured. He's been carrying you too, and he doesn't know how to put it down because you haven't shown him it's safe to. The silence stretched. She didn't fill it. She'd learned not to fill silence. It was the most important thing they didn't teach you in school, that sometimes the most useful thing you could do was stay present in the empty space while someone else found what they needed to say. Ranger stood up. He walked the 3 feet between Tessa and Calloway and pushed his head against Calloway's arm. Calloway put his hand on his dog's head. His jaw tightened, his eyes stayed level. But his hand stayed there, and his shoulder came down an inch, just 1 inch, from where it had been holding itself since he walked in the door. 12 weeks, he said. 12 weeks. Maybe 10, and then he's okay, and then he's better than okay. He nodded slowly. Okay, he said. Not to her, or not only to her. Okay. She walked them out through the treatment corridor rather than the waiting room. Easier route for a dog with a leg wrap, and also quieter. She held the door at the end of the hall, and Ranger walked through, then paused and looked back at her. She crouched. He came back and put his nose against her palm, one long moment of contact, and then turned and followed Calloway toward the parking lot. She stayed in the doorway. Calloway got to his truck, opened the back with the practiced movements of a man who'd done it 10,000 times. Ranger jumped up, too quickly, favoring the wrong leg, and Calloway winced. He looked back at the door, and for a moment he seemed surprised she was still there. He raised one hand, a brief, unceremonious thing. Not a wave exactly, more like an acknowledgement. She raised hers back. She watched the truck pull out of the lot, past the low brick wall with the clinic sign that needed repainting, out onto Briarfield Road, until it was gone. Then she went back inside. There were 3 more patients waiting. There was a cat with a broken jaw, and a beagle with pancreatitis, and a rabbit whose owner didn't know rabbits could get ear infections, which they could and would, and it was Tessa's job to explain it in a way that didn't make the owner feel foolish. She picked up the next chart. She went through the door. It was, all of it, the floor and the gauze and the 12 weeks and the card in the drawer, and the way a dog will sometimes tell you more about a person than that person has said out loud in years, just the work. Plain, necessary, hers. She'd learned a long time ago that it was enough.